Mike versus the world time again. This time we're tackling this important topic. Is the Nick Saban led dynasty over at Alabama? Obviously, Nick Saban has lost to Georgia previous year. This year already lost to Tennessee, Mike. So is the dynasty over? I'm going to let you lead off first this time.
What?
Nick's dynasty over. Yeah, you're the guy. It's not Adam versus the world. It's Mike versus the world.
Okay. So the fun part about this, before you just changed the rules, was that I don't know what you're going to say.
I don't know what you're going to say. So
then I take the opposite, and we don't research this at all.
Zero.
Up with the three topics, as you can attest to. I throw them at you, and we just go into it. So there's not a lot of factual information. It's more like visceral instinct. I think it's in trouble. I think this could be the beginning of the end, and I'll tell you why. There's a lot of things that I don't see characteristically of Alabama lately. In the national championship game against Georgia, they had no solution for when Jamison Williams went out. They don't have speed at wide receiver, and they struggled, with a team that had a penchant for choking, that hadn't been there before, that hadn't won a national championship since 1980, that had every reason to fold when I got within 1 point of them in the fourth quarter. And didn't. They just steamrolled over Alabama and said, this title is ours. Alabama didn't will themselves to victory like they usually do. Tennessee, same thing. They go up by 7, scoop and score. Tennessee should fold. They didn't. Now there's been talk of Nick Saban says we weren't ready. They weren't champions before the game. Willie Anderson comes out and admits there was anxiety under a Nick Saban team. The defensive backs look horrible, uncharacteristic penalties, coaching. There's so many problems here at Alabama. I know they're a one-loss team, but they should have lost to Texas if it weren't for Bryce Young's heroics. That this team is on its way down, and by down I mean this. We've seen his last national championship.
Yeah, all of that can be fixed by one word, Mike, and that's money. And Alabama's going to have a bunch of it because here's what's going to happen. Every year there's going to be coaches fired that need to get on the Nick Saban rehabilitation program. He'll bring in 13 more analysts. He'll beef up his coaching staff. If anything, I think this is going to help him now take the next step and say, what do I need to do to continue to dominate? Because to your point, I lost to Georgia. At this point, it doesn't look promising for this season. I think he goes back in the lab and says, I need more analysts. I need more of this. I need more NIL deals. I need more of something. I think he goes back in the lab and actually reinvigorates himself. And he's got the resources to pull it off. There's going to be any number of coaches fired in the next 1 to 2 years that'll end up back on Saban's staff as analysts, as something. And he'll be back. Marcus Freeman may be in the market in 2 years. Marcus Freeman was a fantastic D coordinator. All of a sudden, he's calling Alabama's defense. Things may look a lot different. So while I certainly agree that right now it's not looking pretty, and one could look at it and say, hey, it looks like Nick and that program have lost a step, I think he'll figure out a way to get the edge back on top. He's got the support. He's not going to ask for a single thing that he won't get. I think he'll ask for everything under the sun. The retired coaches trio will come back in. It'll help him out. Before you know it, Nick will be holding trophies again.
But you mentioned money. Okay, so NIL is apparently a weakness in Tuscaloosa. Now, that may not be the case, or it may be overblown, or maybe that changes, as you mentioned, when he goes to the...
But none of us know what NIL is going to be in 2 years, right? That's NIL today. Right? NIL next year is going to be different.
We do know that NIL is causing problems for him now already. I mean, the Texas A&M had the number 1 recruiting class, and that was NIL, and he's getting a little testy about that. He calls out Jimbo Fisher for buying.
Even better though. That's actually more to my point, Mike, because I'm going to go to Alabama. I'm going to go to Texas A&M. I'm going to get my bag. We're going to suck. I'm not going to play. And I'm like, hey, I want out of here. I'm going to go to Alabama now and actually play for real and win championships. So, yeah, you may lose these kids for a year or two, but on the comeback trail, Jahmyr Gibbs is a great example. You'll find your way back to Alabama. Jahmyr Gibbs, a great running back at Georgia Tech. Now he's a fantastic running back at Alabama. I think that actually helps Nick because kids may chase the bag, but they'll come back because they know they can win at Bama.
I think you're giving credit too much to kids that see the money now. And I also think you're playing into the point that Nick Saban wins national championships. He puts guys in the first round, and all that's great. But he's also Nick Saban. He's extremely arrogant. He's extremely egocentric. He doesn't want to lower himself to boosters. He doesn't want to lower himself to NIL. He doesn't even want to do the transfer portal. They don't like the transfer portal. They got Gibbs. They got Jamison Williams. They're smart about it, Henry Tuoto, but they don't like the transfer portal. Nick Saban wants what he wants when he wants it. College football is changing. I'm not sure if he's got the ability to change with it. And if that does occur, listen, every dynasty ends at one point, okay? They wrote millions of times that Bill Belichick and Tom Brady were done. Well, eventually they were done. So this may be premature. He may win 4 more national championships, and that may look stupid. But this looks like it's near the end. He's 70 years old. They don't have the fire. There's lots of problems here. I'm not sure if he really wants to dig in and try to fix this with NIL, which is probably what he's going to have to do.
I can agree the boat's taking on water. I can agree to that 100%. That there's certainly water getting into the boat, but I do think you mentioned ego. I think the ego works in this case too. He's going to go back in the lab in the offseason and go, what do I need to do to get back on top? Do I need to embrace NIL? I don't want to, but I'll do it. Do I need to figure out a way to maybe get in the portal and get some of these kids? I don't believe in it, but I'm going to do it. I think this may be the wake-up call he needs, because I think the word you also forgot was stubborn. He's clearly stubborn to a fault, right? So to your point, this is the way we do it. This is the Bama way. This is how we win. Now he's going to go back-to-back years without that trophy. I think that's just the boost he needs to go back and say, let's blow this up. How do I do it differently? He'll figure out those little inefficiencies. He'll be Nick Saban. He'll get great players. I mean, he'll do that. If that's through money with coaches, if that's through money with NIL, if that's through transfer portal, he'll get back in the lab and figure it out. I don't disagree that he's on the down slope, but I don't think he's anywhere near the valley, I guess. I'm not really good at skiing. Is it the valley? I'm in Florida.
I'm
Is
sure.
it the peak? I don't know where we're at.
There's peaks and valleys, but I don't know better. Is it a peak or valley's worse, right? Valley peak is better. So he's not.
Well, he's on the way down the mountain. I mean, but he's still not at the bottom of the mountain, if that's what I'm saying.
Right. But he's got to also get back up the peak, which is very difficult to do. And I really thought this would be a sort of a revenge tour type of season for him. I mean, he was beaten by his assistant coach for the first time in the national championship game. And when he shook his hand and seemed happy for Kirby Smart, I paused a little bit. I'm like, who is this guy? This guy should not. But then I saw the fire in the offseason and calling Jimbo this, that, and the other and saying NIL and buying players. I thought this would be pissed off Nick Saban. And I really thought that they'd beat Texas by 30. And they struggled with a 1-point victory that they should have lost. And Bryce Young saved them and made them look, better than they are. And they then Texas A&M, revenge, right? We could beat him by 30. I can get him fired maybe. Nope. Beat him by 4 barely. And they had the last chance to score. Tennessee, we beat them like a drum 15 straight years. No, couldn't stop them at all. This was supposed to be the Nick Saban revenge tour for me, and it's going to be another year without a national championship, and I think this thing's just going to keep dipping a little bit further into the valley. He's not going to go out in a 4-8 record. We know that. 2 though is bad enough in Alabama, where I think Nick Saban will finish in that range for the next few years of his career, then ride off into the sunset and then have someone replace him.
I'll give you this. Again, we're on the downside. The boat's taking water. It's not looking good. But I do feel like Nick's going to get out the oars and the paddles and try to figure out a way to get himself to shore here.
Well, your only rebuttal, honestly, is that because if you had picked that Alabama was done, my rebuttal would have been to you probably 7 or 8 different times. This is Nick Saban. Yeah, say this is Nick Saban.
But again, this is Nick Saban. But this version of Nick Saban needs to change a little bit, right? And I think that's what we're saying here is the Nick Saban you see today, and what you're saying is the game is moving a little bit. Has he moved with the game? You're arguing he hasn't moved as much as he should have, and that's costing him in the margins, right? He's not getting that great receiver that he used to get because he's not in NIL, right? He's not getting that great coach because he's got coaching turnover every year. He's losing those things in the margins. And I think next year he goes back in the lab and says, how do I close up those margins? So I agree that he's Nick Saban, but the Nick Saban we see today has to make some appreciable change to make it make sense for the future. That's why I think the Nick Saban you have now is good, but he can be better, right? And that's why him being Nick Saban just isn't the argument, because Nick Saban has to get a little bit different next year.
But does he want to be better at the cost of his ego? That's the big question. But listen, I learned a long time ago that betting against Nick Saban is stupid. You're a moron if you do it, and me taking this side is stupid. But there's just I got an article coming out tomorrow listing 8 reasons why you should be scared. And I mentioned
I want to argue that we're not even sure he can't win it this year. I don't believe that argument though, so I don't want to make it out loud. But I want to argue that we're not. It's not all in the oven just yet, right? I mean, there could be scenarios where teams lose, and all of a sudden Nick finds himself in that championship game again, and all of a sudden it's third quarter, and the other coach, whoever that is staring across with Nick Saban and pees down his leg, and before you know it, Nick's holding a trophy up. It doesn't look great. So I don't feel good about that argument, but there's still a scenario that Nick Saban's on those sidelines come national championship day.
It's a difficult question to even discuss in any with any relevance, because it's almost like saying, is this guy better than Tom Brady? Is Patrick Mahomes better than Tom Brady? Well, keep betting against Tom Brady. Tom Brady's not going to be the same with Tampa Bay, and he's not this year. But he won a Super Bowl with them. You're betting against Nick Saban's dumb, so I get that. He could win a national championship this year. That's how great he is. Is that I'm talking about the end of a dynasty, and you're right. He could throttle Ole Miss and go to the SEC championship game and get back in the playoff and make a run and win the national title. So it's kind of dumb to discuss whether this is the end when he could still win a national championship. I'm just concerned about all these things I see. These are uncharacteristic. I mean, 16 penalties, 100 yards of penalties against Texas, not blowing out Texas A&M. It just doesn't look good. So we're going to agree to disagree, as we always do. The world usually wins, man. And I don't want the world to win. I want Nick Saban to go out with a national championship, middle finger up to everybody. But I don't think it's going to happen.
On this one, I think the premise had me already a loser to begin with because it's not looking pretty. So we're taking on water in Bama, but I think Nick finds a way to swim.
Well, I also let you pick what you wanted to pick. You didn't have to let me go first.
I'm trying to be a nice guy.
Well, I would have hammered you with Nick Saban's a god, Nick Saban's a goat, Nick Saban's never going to lose, and he's never, that would have been my only point. It's like Nick Saban figures things out. He's smarter than all of us. There's just absolutely no way these penalties are going to continue. There's no way he's going to win the national championship. He's Nick Saban. That's my best argument had you chosen the other, but you didn't. So now I get to pimp my article and 8 reasons why Alabama could be in trouble.